Hi everyone, I'm here at the scene of a Brexit Party rally. It doesn't actually look like it, but we're here well before most people. I've actually just seen Nigel Farage rock up there. Hopefully as the day goes on, I'll be able to talk to a lot of Brexit Party supporters, ask them some searching questions and learn what it is that they think. There was a YouGov poll back in June, which showed that most Conservative Party members, for Brexit to happen, would sacrifice Scotland leaving the UK, Northern Ireland leaving the UK, significant damage to the UK economy, and also the destruction of their own party. Would you be willing to sacrifice as much as that for Brexit to happen?
I'd sacrifice everything for democracy. It has to be upheld. England is built on democracy. It's one of the things that make us one of the great, if not the greatest country on earth. You know, without democracy, what are we? So I'm one of the people that they say it'll affect the most. They keep on saying it'll affect the poorest the most. Well, bring it on. I'm willing to sacrifice it all. You know, and if Scotland want to leave or Northern Ireland, then if they want to turn their back on democracy, so be it. I don't think that they do. I think that they cherish democracy just as much as we do.
Is there any Brexit deal that you'd accept that doesn't end freedom of movement, like a Norway-style deal? Or?
No, I want a WTO Brexit.
So how do you think that would impact the UK economically in the short term and the long term?
So there might be some economic instability after we leave on no deal, but we can't be controlled by fear. The Brexit vote, we knew all the kind of the lies and the propaganda, and also all the Project Fear telling us that this would be economically disastrous for Britain. Yet we still voted for Brexit 3 years ago, 17.4 million people. And I believe that, we'll just brave all instability, and at the end it's going to be much better when we're free.
I hope Boris prorogates again, and Bercow decides to call them back. Boris sends in the army, arrests him for treason, so he gets hanged. Because that is the best situation, I think.
You're being serious. You want John Bercow to be hung?
Absolutely right. He's a traitor. He has been a traitor. He's manipulated Parliament. He's changed the rules of Parliament, and he's destroyed the parliamentary democracy. He's not independent and never has been.
Is there any Brexit deal you'd accept that doesn't end freedom of movement?
No.
Okay, and why not? Why is that an important?
There are too many people here already. Far too many people.
Do you think there's a way to end freedom of movement between the EU and UK without erecting a hard border between Ireland and Northern Ireland?
Probably not. Probably not.
But you'd be happy to put up a hard border?
Yeah.
What if that results in violence and...
I don't understand why it should result in violence, particularly. If they want to be a separate country, everyone else has borders, why shouldn't they? Why does that result in violence? It's just an excuse, probably.
It's just complete nonsense there. We don't need a hard border. People said we can use technology to do that. Okay, if we can't have it just now, let's put a hard border temporarily, and then once we've got the... whatever it is, technology, then install it. Simple as that.
It's entirely possible that we will end up with a reunified Ireland through a series of circumstances nobody could have anticipated until very recently, which will be an interesting turn of events.
Do you think that should be on the table?
Quite possibly. I mean, the people in Northern Ireland have the prospect of a hard, wet border on one side of them, or a hard, dry border on the other, and it should really be up to them to decide which they would prefer if it has to be one or the other.
Can I just ask you about Nigel Farage's reaction to the Supreme Court ruling that took place recently? So on one hand, he said he couldn't see what the Supreme Court found unlawful, but on the other hand, he suggested that based on that ruling, Boris Johnson should offer his resignation to Parliament. Is that coherent? Does that make sense?
Oh yes, absolutely. Nigel is completely correct. There was no law broken. There wasn't any law. And these judges made up a law that didn't exist.
But if he disagrees with that decision, why would he suggest that Boris Johnson resign or offer his resignation based on that decision?
I don't know, really. This is a bit perplexing. Perhaps he thought it would precipitate an election. because that's what we all want. But he must have his own ideas about that, and I'd like to ask him to elaborate on that.
So you've always voted Labour throughout your life, and now presumably you're considering voting for the Brexit Party. What's prompted that change?
Well, just the Brexit. That's all. Nothing else. We voted for out, and it should be out.
What do you think of Jeremy Corbyn's position on Brexit to have a second referendum where...
No, it's wrong. It's wrong. You should respect what the people voted for, and that's it.
And what would Brexit look like to you? What's an ideal Brexit for you?
Well, I can remember back before we were in Brexit. Oh no, sorry.
In the common market?
Before we were in the common market, yeah. And it's something that...
If there were to be a general election that takes place before Brexit happens, are there any circumstances under which you'd vote for the Conservative Party as led by Boris Johnson?
Oh yes, definitely. If Boris can do it, I'm behind him all the way, and so would Nigel Farage be as well. He'd be behind Boris.
What would it take for you to be convinced that Boris Johnson, is on your side, effectively?
If he says that we can leave without a deal and he'll team up with Nigel Farage, we'll easily beat the rest.
So he has to accept his offer of an electoral pact?
That's the only way Boris is going to win, I think.
There were 3 reasons I voted for the Conservatives at the last general election. It was actually the first general election I'd ever chosen to vote in. Previously, I'd always abstained. The 3 reasons were that I wanted to sort of expedite Brexit, I wanted to kill off the Leveson II, which would have restricted freedom of the press, and I wanted the Fixed Term Parliaments Act to be repealed, because there was a commitment to that in that last Conservative manifesto. None of those 3 things are going very well. So it would take a lot to motivate me to vote for the Conservatives again, having voted for them just the once.
How do you think Boris Johnson has done as Prime Minister so far?
Well, he couldn't do worse than Theresa May. What a mess that was. Look, I think he's going to do okay, but the problem is he hasn't got the numbers there. We've got too many Remainers. We have Leave Country and we have a Remain Parliament. We need a general election now so we can clear out the mess that's in there, and we need to have proper people that will actually respect the result and make us leave the EU. No ifs, no buts.
Brexit Party supporters often say they have a strong belief in democracy, but I want to actually test how far that extends beyond Brexit. So quick fire round. Abolition of the House of Lords. Are you in favour? Are you against that?
Probably against.
Against? Why?
Because I like to feel that there's something there just keeping an eye, making sure that they keep the balance right, and keep an eye on what the House of Commons are doing.
But they're unelected, like the EU Commission.
True, but there is that little safety net, that little catch. I just think it's worked so far.
Can't you make the same argument for the EU Commission?
No, because they're not in Britain, they're not necessarily got British interests at heart.
So in my day job for a biomedical charity, I actually work with both Houses of Parliament, and I know good people in the House of Lords who I hold in high regard personally. However, on purely political principle, yes, I would be prepared to support the abolition of the House of Lords.
Why is that?
Because it's an unelected upper house.
What about first past the post? Would you like to see that replaced with a more proportional system?
On balance, I would probably like to do away with first past the post and move to proportional representation. That will come at a cost, because it means less emphasis on voting for the individual, more fallback on party lists. But I think, especially based on recent evidence, first past the post isn't fit for purpose.
So if there were to be a second referendum, I know you don't want that, but the question is, if the options were a sort of WTO Brexit, as is the one being proposed by Nigel Farage, and Remain won, would you ever vote again? Would that mean you lose your faith in British democracy?
It would stretch it. It would stretch it to a point where you would feel that maybe you don't get what you vote for.
So there's a chance you wouldn't actually vote again in any election?
Well, yeah, that could well be, yeah.
Where do you get your news from? How do you keep yourself informed?
definitely not by the BBC. Liars, fake news. No, I get most of my information from various different places. I try to not put myself in an echo chamber. I try to see other points of view, like Stone, Sticks and Hammer on YouTube, Rebel Media, lots of different, what they would say far right, but basically just truthful.
Well, I used to listen to the news before I started thinking that the BBC and Sky and some of the other TV channels were becoming biased. So now it's more on the internet. I like Spiked and YouTube. So the internet, really.
So I think it's important to read a newspaper every day, a print newspaper, because it's yesterday's news assembled for you by an editorial team presenting a consistent view of the world one day after another. I also think it's probably helpful to do that with a newspaper you don't really agree with. So Lars von Trier, the filmmaker, famously said that watching a film should be like having a stone in your shoe. I think reading a newspaper should be a bit the same thing. So for that reason, I have loyally read The Guardian for many years, even though I tend to disagree with it. I also try and read The Times.
Would you say you mainly get your news from YouTube channels?
Yeah, mostly YouTube, because independent, basically. Independent people that go out there, like yourselves, and speak to the people. Because they're the ones to speak to, the people. We're the ones that voted, not these corporations that are trying to push an agenda. They're not even news anymore. They turn themselves into propaganda. That's all we're fed all day long is propaganda. You know, opinion pieces, never facts. They try and skew the facts. They try and say the people that voted are stupid. No, don't listen to them.
The Brexit Party want to fund free Wi-Fi on public transport by scrapping HS2, cutting foreign aid, and using the £39 billion otherwise intended for the EU divorce bill. Do you agree with that?
No, I don't agree with free Wi-Fi because we are zapping ourselves with microwaves. G5 is going to be even more of onerous to our brains. It interferes with our brain waves. We don't know what we're going to do to ourselves, whether there's going to be a mass outbreak of brain tumours or what in the future. But it's not been, if we brought a food in like they're bringing G5, G4 and then G5, it hasn't been tested. If they brought food in like that, they would be outlawed.
No, I think that's very sensible. I think HS2 is turning out to be a white elephant. It's already cost too much and it looks like it's going to cost an awful lot more. So I think cut the losses and put the money somewhere more useful.
And you think free Wi-Fi on public transport?
Well, free Wi-Fi, that's somewhere. I think that's a fairly minor point myself, but you know, that's great.
Abolishing inheritance tax? Another Brexit Party policy?
I'm quite happy with that.
Why?
Well, it's, I think it's an unfair tax. You know, I'd quite like to be able to pass anything I have on to my children in the future without it being taxed. I've paid tax all my life, so why pay tax a second time?
Yeah, you mentioned the structure of the party there. Can it be accused of being a bit too top-down and actually not very member-driven? I know there aren't technically members, they're supporters, but shouldn't people who support the party have more say?
It is open to that criticism. I can't complain about the amount of, about the conversations I've had with Brexit Party representatives and candidates and MEPs and prospective parliamentary candidates for a possible future general election. I can't complain, but I do see how the party is open to that criticism. And I would prefer it not to become something like the 5 Star movement, depending on online polls and things like that. I don't think that holds up especially strongly. I'm open to the idea of things not working as political parties always have recently with membership structures and so on and so forth, but that doesn't mean I'll just sign up to anything. So sort of watch this space. I don't just go to Brexit Party events. There are other pro-Brexit sort of organisations and individuals besides the Brexit Party, and I want to listen to them all. It's all up for grabs right now.